75 arrests. Good morning, or afternoon, depending on when this is shown, and my name is Tom McKenna. This is Agree to Disagree.
Hello again, good to be back with you. John Cockrell.
John and I are going to go over different subjects, and we'll exchange views. The first one, John, I will be surprised if you've got an opinion on it, because we shouldn't surprise each other, but once in a while it's good to surprise
Well, I
each
have an
other.
opinion on everything. You know.
Well, wait to hear this one.
Okay.
So, here's something which I don't have well, I guess it bothers me a little bit. It's the salute. And the military now is allowing veterans to salute during times of honor, flags, services, things. And that's fine. That's fine, no trouble with that. The problem I have with the three branches of government, though, is that in one of the branches, the executive, they are in charge of, I'll say, the military end of it. Whereas as selectmen, we are kind of in charge of the police and fire, although there is different rules about it. But the president basically is in charge of military. He's the boss. The one in my lifetime that was so pronounced was when Harry Truman ordered Douglas MacArthur to do something and he didn't do it, or he didn't sound the way Truman thought he should. So Truman went out and fired him, let him go. Most decorated hero probably of two wars, one and two. Son of a general. I mean, this was one of the most famous military families in the history of the country, MacArthur. And he fired him, he let him go. Well, I'm not getting at that, though. What I'm getting at is the fact that, well, because the executive is the chief of the military, there seems to be an opinion that the military should salute him. And they do. As a result of that, I know Obama said the thing he had to learn when he became president was to be taught by a military person. How do you salute?
Right.
He didn't know how to salute. And there's nothing wrong with him not knowing how to salute. As a matter of fact, I'm in favor of him not knowing how to salute. I don't think the executive branch should be saluting. I think that's a military gesture. It's not only a movement of honor towards the other individual, it's part of the team. I will tell you this may surprise you. I had a vote when I was in the service on whether clerical staff would wear stripes. In the Army, when I went in, all rank, they go E1, E2, E3, that's the way the ranks go. And as you went up in rank, you had a stripe. So the clerks had a stripe also. So if you were in the office, headquarters office, meaning you would not ever be in combat. You have absolutely no role in that whatsoever. You would have the same stripes as the guy who's carrying a flamethrower running through a village. And the military finally said, this doesn't seem right. So what they did was they had us vote. Now in the military, when you vote, I'm not sure they count your vote, but it's nice of them to let you vote. And we voted, and we all voted no. If you notice now, many of the people who are not, I don't just say combat, in action positions in the military, they have an insignia on their arm rather than a stripe, meaning that they're an E2, 3, or 4, or 5, whatever it happens to be, rather than a stripe. And the military person has the stripe. So it isn't as if the military doesn't understand there has to be a difference in roles in the military. Anyway, my opinion is, and I've never heard anybody say it but me, so I guess it's not the majority. I think that military, when the president comes by, should either go to one of two actions for the military. One is a parade rest, which is very proper for the military. It's not sloppy. Or attention. One of those two, when the president goes by. Show him respect. He's the executive branch. But I think when you start saluting each other, you've welcomed him into the branch. And I don't think he belongs in the branch. So that's an opinion which I have on salutes. I don't think the president should be trying to learn, and some of them look funny saluting John, quite candidly. I mean, it looks a little. I don't think the president's, I don't think the executive branch should be saluting, as I recall it in the old days, and it probably has changed. A chief warrant officer received one salute. That was it. And then, of course, you didn't really salute indoors. You know, the thing about it. And I'm sure I'm catching you off guard, so if you have no opinion, that's good. But if you have an opinion, what do you think about a president saluting a general or a lieutenant?
I think I would probably distinguish between the president and the rest of the executive branch.
Well, he's the only one that does that.
Yeah. Well,
And that's different.
And so, in other words, I would say, in addition to president, he is the commander-in-chief.
He is.
And therefore, from a military perspective, he has the right to direct all of the armed forces.
And he does.
And he does. And he does it, he has even more clout than the generals or the colonels or any other high rank, which are always saluted.
Because he can fire it.
By a lesser rank.
Right. Right.
So I would say that I would agree with the saluting taking place with the President of the United States, but no other civilian of any other rank, not even the Vice President. And it's primarily because of the Commander-in-Chief factor, and you go all the way up the line, and I would put Commander-in-Chief over General in terms of his or her power to be able to direct and to be able to override. So that for that reason, I would view him in the chain of command, and I would probably say it's okay.
I would say your opinion is correct as far as the issue is concerned, because that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just say a civilian should be a civilian and a military should be a military, and Harry Truman's the only one who had to really spell it out. And I'm not even sure he had to do that, but in a way, everybody sort of said, go get, you know, Harry Truman got reelected because give him hell Harry is what they used to talk about him. And so that's, you know, that's, you're probably correct.
And I think you
it's just,
I think you
I
add
don't,
to that, Don, a dimension of respect. You know, you're my commander-in-chief. Not only are you in charge of everything, but I have respect because I depend on you to make smart, strategic decisions such that my service will be more valuable.
I think you're correct in this way too, and I believe this is the way it is. The question is, who's the first to salute? And basically, I believe the military salutes the president, and then the president returns the salute. And I'm saying to people, next time you look at it, see if I'm correct, because I've never thought of it that much. But I think that's probably the way it is.
Yeah.
I just think that.
I think that's probably right. In other words, standing at attention and acknowledging,
and then he returns the salute,
right.
I believe. And that's the way it was with military anyway. When you're supposed to salute the higher rank.
You're right, though. I have seen some interesting salutes from presidents.
It looks like they're parachuting out, but that's, you know, that's a matter of opinion. But I just, you know, it's funny because it is, because it's food for thought, which that's my trivia for the day.
All right, that's good.
Food for the day. The military people gave advice to a young president who invaded in what's called the Bay of Pigs, and afterwards the president, who really didn't get along that well with Eisenhower, President Eisenhower. He was after, you know, it was John Kennedy.
Yeah.
And, but John, what I didn't know until recently, because history begins to come out, it leaks out. After the Bay of Pigs was a total disaster, he called General Eisenhower. He called him as a general, not as a former president.
Yeah.
He said, what did I do wrong? And Eisenhower said to him, how many people did you talk to, Mr. President? He said, Well, I talked to the generals. He said, there's your mistake. You see, and here, as the years go by, it's nice to admit to a mistake once in a while, and I've made a few, and I didn't care that much for Eisenhower. It was more political. I must admit that, because he was made by the Democrats, and then when the screen, from behind the screen, he was a Republican, and I'm sorry, I was biased against him for that. But as the years go by, I realized that Eisenhower was one wonderful management person. And not only the interstate highways and all, but just the fact that he talked to John Kennedy. As a matter of fact, he was the one who said, watch out for the CIA. Watch out for the generals. Don't give them too much power, because they'll take it if you give it to them. So Eisenhower was really a very good president. There's no doubt about it. But he was very careful on how he delegated power. And this is why they didn't do much when MacArthur was in there. Eisenhower was in there, because they knew he knew. As they say, he knew where the bodies were buried, John. That's one of the things.
I have I'll always have an affection for Eisenhower, not only for the reasons that you mentioned, but because when the first day I walked into first grade, they gave me a weekly reader with Eisenhower's picture on it. And I never forgot that. And I still have that weekly reader.
Hey, do you really?
After all these
Because when I went into school, because this is how old I was, it was George Washington.
Yeah.
And I no, he was not a guest speaker in my class. Don't you say he was?
Right.
But that was the picture that was there. When I went up to Vermont to a wedding, though, I could not go into a house that did not have a picture of Eisenhower.
Sure.
They all had the picture of Eisenhower.
Absolutely.
And that was in the 50s, and they all loved him. And so there's so many things to say about Eisenhower that we won't. I'd lose my half hour if I started talking.
You sure would.
The other next, I'll go down to something else here, John. I get a thing, and I get a kick out of doing this one on the charter schools.
Oh yeah.
Well, as a educator and as a politician, and I'm one of each. As an educator, I have no objections, it may surprise you, to the charter schools. I think they serve a definite purpose. But as a politician, I'm looking at it, and there was a law that was passed last month. And what it did was, it had to do with the brain injuries, concussions. And what it was, it would say, all members of athletic training, coaches, athletic directors, trainers, and all, must take courses on concussions and training on it. And come to find out, it had been in effect for 50 years. And I'm saying, well, why are they writing it now? They said, now private schools and charter schools must now adhere to that rule. Well, Coyle, my grandson goes to Coyle. That's a private school. Now that comes under that ruling. And I understand why it comes under the ruling. What caught my attention was, though, what in the world was charter schools coming under private school? Why, when charter schools started, which was probably within the last 25 years, John, why, when they started, why did they not come under all the rules of public schools? Well, evidently they don't. And I take exception to the fact that there is a taxpayer school paid for by you and I, us taxpayers, and somehow or other, it doesn't come under the same rules and regulations as the public school. Now, they're going to say, well, those schools are better, those schools are this, those schools are that. I guess if they don't come under the same rules and regulations, you get, because you can do things they don't do. As a matter of fact, I don't know. You may know this, John. I don't know, and I should know it. I don't know. Who do they answer to? Eventually, the state looks in on them, and if they have no money and they've run out and different things, someone in the Department of Education evidently runs them. Whereas you and I, if we send our kids to public school, it's called a school committee. They meet every month. by the way, they're the hardest working people in public life,
Yeah.
school committee people. But I don't know how charter schools are regulated. Do you know? Do you
I
have
do
any?
not know.
So that will be on my assignment to get the next time. I'll ask Pat Riley. She
You're
will
the
know that.
person to do it.
Am I? But anyway, any opinion on charter? Why should
Well,
they
I
be
think
different than public?
Of course, have discussed charter
I know
schools
that.
versus
I
public
know.
schools before. I do come down on the side of charter schools for a lot of reasons.
Oh, sure, they're good.
Yeah, they
not
are
saying-
good in, that certainly academically and in other ways. They give people choice, which I think is important, particularly when the public schools are underperforming. But I think you probably have a point. If you're paying taxes to support the school, you got to be careful about not following
The same
civil
rules, yeah.
unless these rules somehow are attached to subpar performance in the public schools, which is what the charter schools want to avoid.
Well, I don't think the public schools have that. I think school committee people would take issue
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, don't we generally, and that's always a good day for you and I, when we can blame the unions. That's where the sub comes in, and that's for another half hour time.
Oh,
We went
yes.
to that. But I don't think that in the public schools, the school committee is held back in any way, form, or manner as far as the quality of service is concerned. And by the way, some of the charter schools are beginning to close now. There's a couple in Boston which they're beginning to
I
pull
heard
the
that
rug out from
recently,
under them. Yeah. So, it's another story. But I didn't bring it up to bring up that because that, you and I both, we've talked that before. We'll talk it again. But I just say, I was surprised to find out they are cushioned with public school. I just thought, no, they shouldn't be, and that's my own opinion. One thing we talked about the last time you were here on the libertarians, on
Yes.
the Republicans, and
Yes.
we stayed pretty much to that subject. So in the remaining time I've got here, I'd like to talk about the parties as they are, and I'll talk about the Democrats, the Republicans, the Libertarians, and the Independents.
Okay.
Now, I know there's other parties, by the way, the Green Party
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and all that. But here's the thing that strikes me, and it bothered me as a public official that this happens. What happens with the political party is that it is so structured that it caters to a lobby group that is not popular with the general people, That's why you go libertarian maybe, or you go independent. Because what happens is the Republicans to people are too conservative and the Democrats are too liberal, and so therefore they drive people into this independent wedge. What do we call it? Unenrolled.
Right.
That's an official listing at the polls, unenrolled. But I'll give you a couple of the things that happen as a result of these parties, how they cater to particular lobby groups. I say lobby groups rather than saying unions and lobby, because they basically accomplish the same thing. It is my opinion, and it always amazed me, this one. I can give you the easy one right off the bat. Here's a softball, John. There's two ways to play softball. Fast pitch,
Slow pitch.
slow pitch. Shh, I'll give you a slow pitch. The teachers' union, which party do we affiliate them with?
Democrats.
And that's true. And so therefore, and many of the strong unions are also attached to Democrats. But here's the thing that always amazed me as a Democrat. Police, fire, and military are attached to, it could be debated, but I believe the Republican Party. They think republicanism. Has it got to do with guns? I don't know. Has it got to do with the structure of the Republican Party for police, fire, and military? I don't know. But one way or the other, I see it going that way. Now, as a result of that, though, what happens is things happen to those organizations because they don't be objective. Now, of course, who's objective in this world? Just about no one. But the one thing that happened the final couple of years of my career in politics, if you will, or municipal government, they took away what's called the Quinn Bill. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Sure.
The education bill for police and fire.
Took it away.
Yeah.
And basically, a Democratic governor, that someday he hopes he's president, by the way, but I won't mention his name because we can keep a secret here. And the people out there are good at keeping secrets. He basically said about the Quinn Bill, if the local municipalities want to reward those people, they can do it. Well, there's a Democratic statement, because that's the police's cookie. 20%.
Sure.
Do you hear of anybody, as much as we cry about different raises, except for CEOs, getting a 20% raise?
No.
And 10% of it's local and 10% was state. So even the Quinn bill originally, and Quinn just passed away within the last 4 or 5 months, by the way. He was the Attorney General and formerly in the House of Reps. And so what happened is, though, they decided that police people should be educated, and if they will be educated, along the line of police work, by the way, which you're familiar with, obviously, then they should have a reward. There should be, I'll call it a cookie. There's a cookie out there for them if they do that. Well, they took away the cookie. Now, to assume it wasn't the Democrats that took away the cookies, I'm not ready to buy that. But then on the other side of the coin, how come police and fire, that basically are labor unions, how come they're not pro-Democrat? Somewhat escapes me. And I think police and fire will deny it. Military will always say, you know, all the military, they're never members of a political party. They're always unenrolled, you know, until they retire. Colin Powell is the funniest one. Because, I mean, if ever there's a guy that should be a Democrat, it's Colin Powell. He's a Republican, you know.
Yeah.
He's a Republican. And Dwight David Eisenhower.
We would call him a rhino.
Yeah, but see, then the other famous Republican that should have been a Democrat was Dwight David Eisenhower, and that's my age-old. People, you're too young to remember why we're upset, us old Democrats, about Dwight David Eisenhower. Because MacArthur was his commanding general. Eisenhower was other. He was his aide,
Right.
Eisenhower. And MacArthur sent him back from the Philippines before the war now and replaced him while he was in the United States. Sent him back with a message. And then suddenly his job was gone because he replaced him when he was gone. So Eisenhower and MacArthur were arch, I'll use the word enemy, but they were different. They didn't like each other. So, but suddenly a colonel, I think it was light colonel in the 30s, suddenly got a 1 star, 2 stars, 5 stars, and that was Eisenhower, by the Democrats for getting even with MacArthur, who was an admitted Republican. MacArthur was never anything but a Republican. So that's why that's why Harry Truman got upset with Eisenhower, because he was willing to give Eisenhower, before he ran that time, you know, when the big upset over Dewey, Truman, he had tried to talk Eisenhower into running at that time. And Eisenhower, no, you know, he didn't want to tell him he was a Republican. Eisenhower, when he finally got out, said, when I was a boy, the town drunks were Democrats. That's what he said, you know. So that's where the military is. And what amazes me is, and then of course I will grant you that the teachers are pro-Democrat, and so you do not see things happening like if we had the Quinn bill, which we didn't, but if we did, you don't see those kind of things disappearing from the plate. As a matter of fact, there are many local police who wonder whether the current governor got pulled over one day and yelled at, because except for state troopers, who are his chauffeurs, by the way.
Yes, I know.
Except for state troopers, he really is considered by police to be anti-police. But, you know, the police don't get it. He's a Democrat. And they don't like him, and therefore he doesn't like them. That's the way the cookie crumbles. So But the teachers therefore have, now, where does that leave the independents, the libertarian? Out in a boat with no paddle, because they can't do anything. And that's why independents and liberals get mad at the two-party system, because they figure they're owned by, in the Republican Party, they're owned by the lobbyist. And in the Democratic Party, they're owned by the unions.
Well, I have just a couple of brief comments on that.
Sure.
First of all, Don, I don't believe that all the people that call themselves independents are independents.
No, they're not.
I think there's a large group in there that are definitely Democrats or definitely Republicans, and they don't want that to be known because, let's face it, political attachment is very controversial.
Yes.
And what do they say? Never discuss religion or politics? There's a reason for that, and it's because it's
It's a sensitive area.
it is a very sensitive area.
And people leave the different parties because they're just sick of them.
Right. Now,
But
you
you're
know,
right, they
having
still
been-
are.
Now, the Quinn bill, I think I talked to you about that briefly once. I think it was well-intentioned. I think it could be used positively, but I think the fact that the choice is purely the officer's choice as to whether or not they pursue that without regard to needs of the community
Yeah.
and without regard to just how much education you can get is not the way to go, because it's not responding to the needs of the community. So I think there should be some middle ground.
Do you think that business people, never mind police, we'll get away from that for a minute, don't business people as a rule try to advance themselves so their
Sure.
career will advance?
Sure.
Well, then, wouldn't therefore police, which I don't know how the fire didn't get in on this, by the way,
Right.
but wouldn't you think the police then would take extra courses to get their masters, not only to get more money,
Yeah.
but also by being better educated than they were,
Well, yeah.
be a better officer?
Except I would say this, I would say that with police work is fairly standard. I mean, you have your patrolmen, then you have your detectives,
Yes.
and you have your undercover, you have different branches of it, et cetera, which require different skills.
Yes.
But I believe that at some point, as you advance within a police organization, common sense is worth far, far more than any additional education you're going to get necessarily.
Street smarts.
Yes, street smarts, that's exactly
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And interestingly, you'll see people with good street smarts, if they hang around long enough, they'll become chiefs.
Yeah.
They'll become captains. They don't even need that education. And, there's probably an argument out there whether your ordinary patrolman needs a master's degree. Now, I know you being an educator, and I know you feel that the more education they can get, the better, but then there's a wide open tax purse there to pay for it. And when you have limited dollars, you know how I feel about taxation, you have to pick and choose and select the option that provides more for the community. So none of it's
Yeah.
black and white to
Yeah.
me. I don't sit on the
No, I
black
know.
and white fence
No, I
there.
know. Well,
But
you have the police experience
it
too,
needs to
so
be
you
looked
add
at.
that to it.
Yeah.
You've worked with other policemen, and you know that, and I think street smarts works for just about anybody in any occupation, but
But it's
especially in the police work.
Yeah, it's particularly important in that
Yeah.
because you have to make judgments almost continuously about how somebody is going to react. I mean, think
Yeah,
about it.
in the old days, a policeman might even give a guy a ride home if he's drunk.
That's right, and I did, more than
And I'm
once.
saying that's street smart. No, but it means that's logical.
Right, yeah.
So I just, there's a lot to be. I also will admit with my, I wear two hats. You shouldn't wear two hats, John. You look funny when you do that, and I try. So that's not funny. But I know occasionally I would say that the Quinn bill was a little more aggressive. I think, yes, 10% would have been nice, 5 and 5. Because basically with the bachelors,
Yeah.
they get one, and then with the masters, they
know.
go to the other. So I would say it was a little aggressive. But to have a governor come out and say, well, the local communities will decide, where are the local communities going to get this money, Mr. Governor? You claim you're not going, you're going to assist citizens in taxes, and then you turn around and say local communities are going to come up with 20% of the budget.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my, and at this point here, I lateral to John
Well,
Cochran.
thank you very much. Touchdown. Okay, well, I have a few issues that I hope spike some interest here with our
Sure.
viewers. And this is a few weeks old now, but it's still very, very relevant. You've heard of Amanda Knox,
Yes.
I take it. Amanda Knox, for those of you that don't know, Amanda is an American woman accused, along with her boyfriend, of the murder of a roommate in Italy. Knox and her boyfriend were arrested days after the murder and spent almost 4 years in prison.
Yes.
But both were later released by acquittals at a second-level trial that took place in October of 2011. Knox then returned to the United States.
Is that
She was free.
2011?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, the prosecution then appealed to the Italian Supreme Court, this case, which ordered a third trial. The new trial began in September 2013. Now, while the trial was going on, Knox remained in the United States,
Right.
but her boyfriend was still in Italy. So on January 30th of this year, the court returned a guilty verdict, sentencing her to 28 years in prison.
Wow.
Now, since Italy has an extradition treaty with the United States, it wants Amanda Knox back. So, the question is, and I'll put a question to you.
Ah,
Should we send Amanda Knox back to Italy to face trial?
you're going to give me a vote on this.
I want to hear what
I
your
will say,
vote-
scusa momento, grazie.
Yeah,
Don't hold your breath waiting for Amanda to return.
yeah.
You know, if you,
Well, I
if you're
believe
having
that
lunch.
too, but
To-
what
to
do
my
you think
opi-
is right?
Well, I understand that we're going to have to use creative thinking to keep Amanda in the United States. But this is the American way.
Right.
You don't try a person twice for a
Double
crime.
jeopardy.
And therefore,
That's my feeling.
they had their bite of the apple.
That's my feeling. But is that enough? Remember, that's our law.
That's right.
This crime was not committed under our law. It was committed under Italian law. Does that make a difference? Now, if this was your daughter, you would say, hell no, she's not going back.
I'm saying, hell no, she's not going back. She's not my daughter.
I
I'm
know.
saying no, she's not going
But I mean,
I wouldn't
regardless
say-
of the circumstances, you wouldn't
Yeah.
want to do. Is there any reasonable?
Wiggle room.
Yeah. Is there any reason why you think they might ultimately? Remember, if they don't send her
it's in the
back.
treaty.
Yeah. So then what happens? What if we want to get somebody back from Italy? What happens? They say, hey, forget it. So what's the sense of having the treaty in the first place? The extradition treaty.
I'm going to give you which the Italian people are going to say, oh, sure, McKinnon. I love Italy.
So do I.
And I spent 1.5 years
Oh, in the service.
in a service in Trieste, Italy. And I got to know many Italian people. I traveled throughout the entire boot. And I would say that if I were not so, unaware of the fact I probably should have learned to speak the language, I would love to live in that country, if for no other reason than the people.
You wouldn't like to drive there, though.
Oh yeah, I had an international license.
That place
Oh
is
no,
awful.
no, but you're on the right-hand side of the road. It would be putting me on the left-hand side of the road, which would be danger to you and your family. You're on there. When are you on the road, McKinnon? You know, but no, I loved Italy. I loved the people in Italy. But I'll give you one quick example.
They're very affectionate.
They're just kinder and gentler than most people you meet in
Well,
your
but
lifetime.
they're naturally affectionate. I mean,
They're Latin.
You'll see a couple
Yeah.
hugging and kissing right in the in the open in the mall.
Yep.
Around here, you
Yep.
probably get arrested for it.
Yeah.
But over in Italy, it's perfect.
It's just the way. Well, I'll give you a quick thing on class back in the 1950s. I was there. People said, well, you were there, in the 50s. Well, it's true. I was there in 53 into 4, 53 and 54. At that time, we had a president named Dwight David Eisenhower. And Dwight David, in this day, and as a matter of fact, the president now is getting some heat on his appointments as ambassadors. But presidents, since the beginning, have always taken a certain percent that are professional and must go to a country, and a certain percentage who reward them for their contributions to make them president of the United States. And Obama's undergoing some real criticism on that now, and that's for another show.
Yes, it is. I'll just say well-deserved, and I'll leave it there.
Okay, but however, Dwight David Eisenhower, one of his major backers, was Claire Booth Luce, and her husband was editor, I think, of either the Washington Post, New York Times, one of those major medias at the time. And so he wanted to send Claire Booth Luce as the delegate from the United States. And Italy said, what do you suppose they said? No way. You are not, because at that time in the 50s, Italy had a social sphere that women had to know their place. And at that time, if you sent them a female ambassador,
Yeah.
it would be an insult
Yeah.
to their country. Don't send it. And they said, don't send her.
Yeah.
What do you suppose Dwight David did?
Send a female.
He sent her anyway. Put her on the plane, and over she goes, she lands. Fortunately for me, I didn't claim disability, so don't yell at me. I was running to the plate to score with 2 outs, and I yelled to the fielder who got the ground ball, throw to the plate, because that isn't the play. I was doing it to be disruptive, which
Right.
you'll find hard to believe.
Yeah,
I would
I
be
do,
disruptive.
yes. I can't
Throw
imagine.
to the plate, throw to the Well, the man did. And so I had to slide, and I caught on, my ankle snapped, and
Oh,
now I'm
boy.
in a cast. It is not a pleasant thing.
No.
And the reason I bring this up, not as to give you a story of sports, but to say we were ordered at that time to leave Italy. Now, Trieste was a free territory, so they couldn't order us out of Trieste. But they ordered us out throughout the Italian country. They threw us out of Italy.
Yeah.
So we had to go and to break down everything, and that was a detail that my group got sent on. But Donnie McKinnon didn't go because he's stupid enough to yell, throw it to the plate. So I stayed home. But my point is that Italy is tough. They are tough. And they are very sure about what they say. And you are right, John. You have raised the #1 issue of not sending her back. What happens if the reverse is, that's it. Because otherwise, I have no problem with it whatsoever.
Now, the other thing, quite frankly, I don't know if you've seen her. She's a very attractive girl.
I've seen her. Beautiful
Very
girl.
attractive.
Yeah. Beautiful girl.
Well,
Well-spoken?
Yes, very well-spoken, very articulate,
Yeah.
you know, somebody's daughter. And you wonder if it were somebody else that maybe looked more like maybe it was a troublemaker,
Yeah.
if you might make a different decision. But I will tell you,
Yeah.
from my perspective,
Yeah.
there is no way that I would send that girl
No.
back to Italy. And I would use that double jeopardy clause. If nothing else works, I would say, listen, she's a United States citizen,
Yes.
and in this country,
You had your
do-
battle,
yeah,
you had
do
your bite
not
of the
get
apple, you
tried
had to get a
twice.
chance to prove it.
So we'll have to see what happens with that.
I originally thought, John, and you and I have followed this since the trial,
Yeah,
I originally thought that the one thing that got her in trouble was that she had just arrived.
Yeah.
She had hardly unpacked.
right.
No disrespect to the young lady that was killed. She didn't know her that well. The lady it was a terrible thing. But one of the things that seemed to come across is there seemed to be a lack on her part of involvement in that, rather than going about and crying and saying,
Right.
this is the terrible thing, oh my
I know.
God, there was a lack of involvement on her part. And I will tell you that we have seen in this country people who have been convicted because they appear arrogant, they appear not likable,
Yeah,
and therefore they are sentenced to prison for long periods of time because they act that way. There are people that are that way. Unfortunately for this young lady, at that time, that's the way she appeared to the Italian judicial system.
That's right.
You don't care, you don't, well, then we'll show you. And
Now,
then-
having said all this,
and they was-
I don't know whether she is guilty or not. I still don't know.
No,
But based upon
yeah,
the laws, it doesn't seem right that she should now have to go back there. Having said that,
Yeah.
what about her poor boyfriend? He's sitting in jail for 28 years.
looks that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, so,
So I don't know whether his crime was considered the same as her.
don't
One
know.
of them is considered to have done it, the other, I guess, is an accomplice.
exactly.
So I don't know which way. And by the way, I believe they already have someone serving time for doing it.
yeah, I think that's right.
Excuse me. How many people do you want
Well,
doing
that's-
it?
That's why,
You know,
I don't
but
know.
anyway, we both
Italian law
love it.
is tricky.
We love Italy, and I'll
We
tell
do
you,
love it.
if, well, I've got 100 stories on Italy, so, but I love Italy, but no, she can't go back.
Yeah,
Because
okay, well,
I'll
we
take my
agree on
risk
that one.
with,
Now, this next thing that I'd like to talk about, I found very interesting for another reason which shall become obvious almost immediately. There was a case where a driver in St. Louis was given a citation, and I think probably a lot of our viewers out there might be able to relate to this.
you think our viewers are people that would get citations? and so-
No, I think our viewers might be people who would do this.
Oh,
They gave him a citation for flashing his lights
Oh.
and warned drivers
yeah,
of an upcoming speed trap. Okay? Now, why do I say it's of a particular interest to me? Because I was also a cop.
and you,
So I was on the other side. Now, he contested the ticket, and he won.
oh,
He won. In the case,
he must have had Judy
Judge Henry
Fagan.
Autry ruled that a driver
Yeah,
has the right to flash their lights under the First Amendment.
wow,
Freedom
free
of
speech,
speech.
free
Free
speech.
speech. So Autry went further in this case, Judge Autry, and he issued an injunction to stop the Ellsville police from enforcing that policy. In other
Wow,
words, they
Yeah.
can't give anybody a citation now
Yeah.
for flashing their light.
yeah.
Now, what do you think about that ruling of the judge?
I agree with the judge, Joe.
You agree with the
Right
judge?
off the hand. Years ago, there was a Tarasca. Oh, townies will say, oh yeah, we remember him. He tagged everybody in the city.
Yeah, I think I remember.
Tarasca, his
I
name
think
was.
I remember
He
that
tagged
name.
everybody. If you're related, I apologize.
Yeah.
He tried-
Yeah.
And one time, he tagged someone for going over a line. And, where you stop, and he tagged them. And finally, the Judge Welsh, I believe, it was Johnny Welsh's, the Deacon John's father, said,
Right.
Officer Tarasca, please, there's a limit to what we do,
Yeah.
and that's one. That, to me, tagging that gentleman, they should have pulled over, yelled at him,
Yeah.
but no, tag him, I don't think that's worthy of tagging.
Okay. Now,
Uh-oh,
will-
where are we going with
no,
that?
I tend to agree with you in part, but I'm also conflicted.
Because you're a cop,
The reason why, well, that's right, but also because
yeah,
there's no doubt that people speeding,
yeah,
particularly at a high rate of speed,
yeah.
are a danger to themselves and to everybody around them.
And the
And
guy flashing the
sometimes-
light might not be
Yeah,
doing a
And
favor.
that's right. If somebody is warning this person of an upcoming speed trap,
Yes, yeah.
that is the type of person where maybe they should be stopped.
Yeah,
And that may prevent or slow them down so that there's not an absolutely horrific scene when they finally crash into someone later on. So from that perspective, I think, but then you have to ask yourself, well, what are the differences here? For instance, I flash my lights myself at people to tell them there's a cop up there, even though I was a cop. Now, why do I do that in part? Okay. If you get a ticket or you get a citation, what happens? Depending on the citation and so forth, you might get driving surcharges.
yes, you do, that's
What
awful.
I hate,
I hate
especially in
surcharges.
Massachusetts,
Oh, I hate surcharges.
is if somebody's going 10 miles per hour, whatever, over the speed limit,
Yeah.
and they get cited, then what? They have to pay surcharges on their insurance for 6
Yeah.
years or
Yeah.
something? Are you kidding me? So from that perspective, I feel that that is a very, very bad law. You know,
Officer,
maybe you give them
officer, if you
something
pull
less.
that person over, would you maybe give them a warning?
Well, give them a warning, or maybe give them a $10 ticket or something, but you don't penalize them by making them pay
Surcharge for the
30%
next 3
more on-
years.
Yeah, that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that part of it bothers me. Now, the other thing is,
Now,
it's-
that's insane. Do you think they have the same crazy laws as in Massachusetts?
Who?
Do you think was it St. Louis?
Yeah,
I'm saying, do you think there they have
Well, I-
surcharges also?
I don't know.
Insurance.
I don't know, but I'm thinking of the surcharges here for
Yeah,
most
I know.
people.
I agree with you.
Now, here's another thing. Some people use radar detectors, okay? Radar detectors can be very, very useful, and it can keep you out of trouble.
Yeah.
Now, there's an element out there that says, wait a minute, you shouldn't be able to have a radar detector. The police are doing their job. If you're breaking the law, you want to be ticketed, you ought to be fined, you ought to pay more for your insurance, whatever the case is. Then the individual is saying, you know what, sometimes I go over the speed limit a little bit, I'm in a hurry, or I have to get
Yeah.
somewhere or something.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay for the insurance again, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. Now, a radar detector is legal in Massachusetts.
So
So if
therefore,
Yeah.
if you can do a radar, then I should
Why
be
can't
able
you
to
flash
flip my
your lights? Exactly. So there's one inconsistency, but now to show you how, I guess I would call it fragmented this whole thing is.
Uh-oh.
There's a difference between a radar detector, okay, which I have, by the way, myself. There's a difference between.
may have to-
But I don't speed, Dawn. I don't speed.
Margot, get a police officer down here, please. John will be here for another
A
15 minutes.
radar detector, okay, it does one thing. It tells you up ahead there's a police officer. Now, except if they're using certain kinds of radar, for instance, if you use laser, there's 3 different bands of radar. There's K, there's KA, and there's X. That's back when I remember.
You've
this.
looked into this
Oh,
thing.
Well, I knew them at one time. And so a couple of them are new since I was out as a patrol car. But then there's something called laser. The problem with laser is by the time your radar detector picks up that there's a police officer
Is
ahead,
that the kind you have?
they've already got you.
Yeah, so you don't have that kind.
No, I have that.
You have that kind. So they would already get
But not a
you.
lot of police officers use laser.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is, like I said, if you get them, they've already got you. So from that point, there's a weakness.
It's over. You
But here's
lose.
what's illegal.
Okay.
There are also units out there which will scramble the signal of the police radar so that they don't even know your speed.
Oh.
And those are illegal in Massachusetts.
Oh.
So now you've seen the 3 aspects
Yeah,
of this.
yeah.
The flashing lights, is that legal? Is it not legal? The radar detector, is that legal? Is that not legal? And finally, the radar scrambler, which is that legal or not legal? But I found it interesting that
It is interesting
that the
because
judge would permit.
because we are the one where they want to take your pictures. They have the camera.
Oh, yeah.
And that's another story. I think I voted for that.
Yeah, that's called POP.
You know, and I don't think that's too bad because basically they tag you for money, but they don't get surcharges and.
But Massachusetts is ridiculous with those surcharges. Absolutely.
Oh, I know.
ridiculous.
I know.
And that's if you're in an accident.
That's the insurance
Obviously.
company's lobby
Yeah.
group getting those laws passed, right?
Terrible.
Well,
I
then
mean,
they
you
should.
really feel that.
Hey,
That could go up 30%.
Yes.
So, you know, if you're going to pay that
Yeah.
for 5 or 6 years or
Yeah.
whatever the law,
that's
it's totally
that's a
ridiculous.
sizable thing.
Okay. You were talking about, let's see what I get here, left.
We let the guy go, is that what we decided? Let him go?
We let him go.
Okay.
We're going to talk a little bit about minimum wage,
Yes,
okay?
10-10.
Very much in the
Yeah.
news now.
Yes.
I know you were looking at that the same time I was looking at that.
Yes.
So would you like to,
No, I want you're the boss on this, and then I'm gonna rip
So
it to
in-
shreds.
okay. Well, how do you know which side I'm coming down on? With
Don't know.
Republicans
People who
opposing.
think we know, we don't know, John, right?
With Republicans opposing the wage increase in Congress, many states have tried to act on their own. Now, here's a little
Yeah.
bit of information. At least 14 states are pursuing efforts to raise the minimum wage this year, according to the
Yep.
Economic Institute.
Yep.
Last year, California, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, and Rhode Island passed legislation to increase their state minimum wage on their own.
Yes.
And cities such as Chicago, New York, San Diego, Seattle, Oakland, California are also exploring minimum wage increases, the group found. Now, Democrats said
Uh-oh.
and say
Yeah.
that raising the minimum wage would boost consumer spending, which would help local economies.
And-
The Republicans
yeah,
say
okay.
raising the wage would destroy jobs. What do you think?
Well, I think both are correct in a fashion, but I think and speaking as a Democrat now, the number one argument economically for raising isn't to give the people more money, because the money automatically goes back into the marketplace. Poor people spend all their money because they're poor. So if you give a person a $5 raise, they're going to spend the $5. They're going to put it into the marketplace. Now, it's true, they might buy cigarettes, or they might get lottery tickets and things, but I'm saying, basically, they'll put the money back into it. How many jobs will be lost as a result of that? My opinion on that is, John, if we put off raising minimum wage with the threat of losing jobs, Christ said, the poor will always be with us. Jobs will always be lost when you raise minimum wage. You're not going to stop that. So therefore, that argument stands forever. The minimum wage that we have now is less than it was in the 50s, when unions really weren't that strong. So why have we not kept up with minimum wage is because of the fact that my contention is the Republicans keep winning the argument about you're going to lose jobs. You're not going to lose that many jobs in the final analysis. And I've known people, a friend of mine, when they raised minimum wage years ago, they started to charge the person to have meals at the restaurant where they used to get it for free, and they ate up the minimum wage. So minimum wage to me must go up, and I agree with by state there should be a difference, because obviously the amount of money it takes to live in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, I imagine Chicago, is different than it is to live in a poor state, which I
absolutely.
won't mention, but let's say Arkansas or Arizona.
That's
Not
very
Arizona, I say, yeah. But the poorest states. And so therefore, I think the states should be able to set a different caliber of minimum wage. But I know that the president is pushing $10.10 an hour. I think that's fair. In Arkansas, you might be doing pretty good to get to 10.10. In Massachusetts, not that well with the 10.10, so I think Massachusetts should be more. So I understand you're going to lose jobs, and I'm going to say, sorry about that, but that's just the way it is. I've always lose jobs.
Well, I would favor more the issue that you will lose jobs. And I would say also that raising the minimum wage hurts businesses if, in fact, they have a low-margin business and they're used to paying lower wages to workers, and suddenly they have a higher expense where they're trying to make a profit. They either have to pass that on to the consumer, or they have to lay off some of their staff to accommodate that. But you made a very important point about where the work is being done, because the government knows that. So you said Obama wants to raise the minimum to $10.10 or whatever.
Yeah. Nationally.
Now, when I worked for the U.S. Treasury Department, for the government, we had, and then I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank, you know that.
Yes.
And the Federal Reserve Bank, I think you also know, has 12 district banks, okay? The salaries in each of the 12 district banks, even though they were for the Federal Reserve, differed by location in recognition of the cost of living.
And that's federal, and they differ.
So there's the federal itself.
So we're correct.
Yes. Recognizing that, you don't just say $10.10
No.
and one size fits all. So that's a very astute point that you made there. One other thing I'd like to talk about just briefly, John, is the Russian invasion of Crimea and the Ukraine.
Sure, and we will probably go into that next
We probably
show
will.
also.
We'll continue with that. But
But
just,
right now, let's volley.
just to mention it, I found that absolutely amazing that, you know, we'd have this kind of a situation going right now. And from everything I've learned since then, I hate to say it, but I think our country is probably at one of its lowest points in history in terms of its preparedness to deal with foreign affairs and disruptions. And I hate to say it, but I think our leader has exhibited such weakness in all of his international dealings, and you can just go right down the list to the extent that, you know, his let's make peace and talk over a cup of tea approach has really hurt us. I mean, we have this situation now where the Russians took over Crimea. I don't think they're going to give it up, first of all. I don't know how you feel.
No, I don't believe so.
Now, the question is, will they go any further than that?
That's the question.
But I mean, what are we saying? We're saying, first of all, now would Eisenhower do this? The administration has said, we're not going to attack you militarily. What in
Poor
the world?
Eisenhower. We'll leave him alone. Wasn't he the guy in France when Gary Powers bailed out of the airplane and he was the guy? So you'll leave Dwight
Well,
David
Putin is
alone.
a bad guy, you know. He's a bad dude. He's right out of that KGB. He thinks
Yeah, I
all style.
understand.
But you don't tell
Yeah.
people. You don't
What
tell
about
them
though, John? Not to just change the subject,
Yeah.
but what about when Russia invaded Georgia?
Yes, that.
And Bush.
That's right.
Because they did a takeoff on that. They say maybe if there was a more militant type guy. Wait a minute.
Well, when
Bush
Bush
invaded
was
two
militant.
different countries.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it was the longest war in the history of the United
That's true.
States
But
of
Bush
America.
was on his way out. He was
When he
already,
invaded
He was
Georgia?
lame, yeah. When they invaded Georgia, he was already transitioned.
Oh, is that why he did that?
Yeah, it's
That's what would
transition.
he have done?
I mean,
what would he have done?
I don't know. The question is, should we have been more bold with Russia and told them they have to leave Crimea? What else did?
Or what?
What? Or we
Or what?
bring in military to get them out of it.
You're gonna go into this in real detail
Yeah.
next time around.
To get 'em out of it.
Because basically,
'Cause that's
you
all
just
it is.
said boots, which nobody. You're the
I
first
didn't
guy.
say boots.
You're the first guy in the United States of America to say this. This is a historical moment.
It is a
Oh,
historical
oh,
moment.
oh, oh. Well then, if
I didn't-
military by who? Who are we gonna send
Wait
in
a
the
minute.
military?
I don't think we're going to do anything, and for that reason, I think they're going to keep Crimea, and I'm not sure they're not going to go after the rest
But
of it.
I asked you what you were gonna do, and you said
former
you
Russian state.
move on the militarily. You did say that.
Yeah, I did. I would move in the military as a threat.
Who in the
If they
military is
don't get out of
moving?
Crimea, because that's the only thing that Putin understands.
I see.
The only thing, if Russia had been strong, we would have had more of our allies with us. What signals have we sent out?
If Russia
We
was
didn't go
strong in
into-
the first place, we wouldn't have, this wouldn't have occurred in the second place, because these are all, what he's invading are former Russian
I know that.
territories.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I
so
know that.
therefore, he does not come off quite the way we like to paint him.
Yeah, but we're saying, we're telling the opposition that we're with you, we're standing with you. I
Yes.
mean, as if our reputation isn't damaged enough. Nobody in the world respects us anymore. Nobody in the world thinks that we abide by our word. And let's face it, there's been a few
Is it just
few
since
lies
this
told
president,
along the
prior
way
to
here.
this, when Bush was in, did everybody respect us?
No, absolutely not. But
When did we stop being respected, John, do you suppose, in your world?
in my world,
Yeah, your world. When did we stop?
I think we were stopped being respected as soon as President Obama came into office.
Well, then it didn't happen with Bush. We
No,
were
I don't. I
respected.
think we were respected with Bush. Like you said, why wouldn't we be? Bush started the Iraq
You
War.
fight every guy.
Bush went into
Yeah.
Afghanistan.
Yes, he did.
There was nobody doubting that Bush had the courage to do what he thought was right. Now, Georgia was a separate thing. What war has Obama
I wonder
fought
why they
and
don't
won?
bring him into some of these things now that people are running. Why don't they ask former President Bush to come in and speak to the citizens?
He's already made it known that he prefers not to speak. And
Then he isn't as dumb as he looks.
no, he's certainly not dumb. But look at what Obama's done. Has Obama won any war? Has Obama started any war?
Well,
Now, they might
next
have
time,
thought,
we got
look,
a
they
minute
were
to
afraid
go,
of
and we're
Reagan.
going to say next time we're going to go
They
into
were afraid of Reagan.
We're going into war. You'll have the first half hour, and you're going to start off with war.
All right.
And you're going to explain to me military.
Everything
Not
that
being our
Obama
own.
did
You're gonna-
internationally has been a travesty. Starting with Syria, he didn't go in there in time, and as a result, what happened to Syria?
We thank everybody for
What are we
watching
doing
today.
in Iran?
We thank everybody for
Now,
watching
see,
today.
I'm ready to go and start all over again.
John wants to spend another hour. But listen, that's what makes the difference of agree to disagree, because we're going to agree to disagree on this, and we're going to have some good opinions next time around on whether Obama is wiser than Bush.
Not a chance.
Thank you all for watching.
Thank you very much for being with us. Look
See you
forward
in
to
2
seeing
weeks.
you again.
That went well.